Hello and welcome to another video on FS Elite. I'm Tom and today we will be doing a head-to-head with LatinVFR and AmSim and Beautiful Model of the World collaboration of San Diego International Airport for Microsoft Flight Simulator. San Diego International, formerly known as Lindbergh Field, is located in Southern California about 14 miles from the US-Mexico border. It is a single runway airport that sees primarily domestic US traffic in addition to a few European, Asian, and Canadian carriers, plus cargo and general aviation. The airport's close proximity to downtown San Diego gives impressive views on the approach to its runway 27. LatinVFR's version of the airport is available for $15.99 US, while VMworld AmSim's is available for $22.50 Australian, or about $15.30 US at the time of writing. LatinVFR released their version in October 2020, while VMworld AmSim released theirs in October 2023. LatinVFR's KSAN in this video is version 1.0.5, and the VMworld AmSim version is 1.1.2. This video will feature labeled clips of each airport, one after the other in the same order each time where applicable. If one airport does not have something like a modeled interior, only the one that does will be shown. There is a complimentary article on fselite.net that goes along with this video. It contains further images taken at the real airport on a recent trip I was on, side by side with the two sim airports. I highly encourage you to check it out as well. Given the 3-year gap between releases, the airport has seen some changes in that time. This is evident at Terminal 1, where gates 1, 2, and 3 have since been removed. From what I can tell using Google Earth's historical imagery tool, this change occurred sometime in 2022. LatinVFR's version does still have these gates depicted as it was released 2 years prior, and VMworld AmSim strangely also have them, though without the building that leads to them. From the Google imagery, this configuration doesn't exist. The gates were fenced off and the building was torn down and the ramp torn up to make room for the new Terminal 1 currently under construction. Moving along, the lights on top of Terminal 1 are more accurate on the LatinVFR version than the VMworld AmSim model. Both airports have fewer light poles than reality, and not all are in the correct positions. Ground markings at the gates aren't completely accurate for either developer, with each missing some elements or having extra elements. In the case of LatinVFR, some gates have the red engine caution areas, but the Google Earth imagery and what I experienced in person doesn't have these at all gates, even at the time the scenery released. The VMworld AmSim version leaves out the aircraft type markings for the gates, while LatinVFR has some with an inverted color palette. LatinVFR does, however, have a jetway for gate 13, which the VMworld AmSim version left out. There are other minor differences between the modeling of the two on the terminal buildings, such as with positions of stairways, signs, and windows. LatinVFR's models are definitely lower quality, while VMworld AmSim has more detail in these smaller elements. For example, each step on the stairs is modeled in VMworld AmSim's, while LatinVFR is more of a textured ramp. On the landside portion of Terminal 1, we can see the LatinVFR model has an elevated walkway with modeled bus and taxi stops. VMworld AmSim is more up to date here, with having the elevated walkway removed, but they don't include the transportation stops. During my trip through the airport, I noticed the area was still heavily under construction. From Google Earth, the parking lot further back was last captured in February 2022, with the walkway still present. The roadway running directly along the terminal is undergoing considerable amount of work and rearrangement until the new Terminal 1 is completed. Transitioning over to Terminal 2, the ground markings around the gates appear more accurate on the VMworld AmSim version here, with parking spots being wider and closer to the terminal building in some cases, though still missing the aircraft type markings. There are still some inaccuracies in the actual taxi line placement, caution areas, access roads, and many of the lines have rounded corners instead of sharp corners. The terminal model is fairly well done and is more accurate than the LatinVFR version. The VMworld AmSim model also include the gate numbers on top of the jetways and the terminal, which are accurate, while they are missing on the LatinVFR version at some gates. Giving a further look at the windows, LatinVFRs seem to be frequently out of place or of the incorrect quantity compared to reality. Theirs also has some extra depth, with the frames being inset into the building slightly. Unfortunately, this isn't accurate, and VMworld AmSim did do a much better job in that aspect. The one detraction from it, however, is that there are a number of spots I noticed in gaps between the windows and walls, letting me see the untextured interior of the model. Further examining the geometry of the LatinVFR building's circular structures, they do show some more visible polygons that aren't quite as smooth. VMworld AmSim's model uses more polygons and portrays the circles more accurately. There are areas under the terminals of both airports that are fairly inaccurate. This area in reality is used as parking and storage space for GSE and other airport equipment, and is fairly large and open. Both airports didn't exactly capture this area well, with some of the undersides being either non-existent or full of divider walls instead of support columns, thus sectioning it off. Generally, the LatinVFR version feels less empty than the VMworld AmSim version, simply due to the fact that they include some amount of GSE, ground service equipment, and people that are fairly minimal with the latter, though still present. I know some aren't a fan of equipment, as it may cause conflicts with other third-party add-ons, such as FS Stream Team's GSX. On the far west side of the airport, neither developer did particularly well at capturing the ground markings and buildings. VMworld AmSim included a building depicted as under construction and the associated changes in the gate layout. LatinVFR's version predates this construction and has some elements clipping through each other in their version. When I flew through at the end of February 2024, the building looked complete. Other than this, landside on Terminal 2, VMworld AmSim has much higher levels of detail and better quality textures. LatinVFR does contain some since-removed solar panels and relatively low-quality roadways and building features. The VMworld AmSim version also contains plenty of vehicles such as buses and taxis waiting to whisk your virtual passengers off. For AI traffic using the Alpha India Group or AIG traffic for testing, both airports were relatively accurate in airline gate assignments. Neither one was perfect, with some airlines appearing at improper gates with both, though LatinVFR did seem to be slightly more accurate. Around the airport grounds, I'd say that neither developer has particularly bad ground textures. Similar to the buildings, the LatinVFR ones are lower overall quality, but have more subtle weathering and variation, while the VMworld AmSim textures are slightly more uniform, but sharper, with more of the finer details present. A number of places I noticed some small out-of-place taxi lines on the VMworld AmSim version, while the LatinVFR one has general inaccuracies due to being out of date when compared to the present-day airport. LatinVFR also featured two side-by-side windsocks pointing in opposite directions, which is something I'd honestly expect to be fixed after so many years on the market. A pilot with one windsock knows where the wind is blowing, a pilot with two is never sure. Around the air traffic control tower, I do like the use of the satellite imagery LatinVFR used, though a touch low res, while VMworld AmSim made the ground a dirt texture that looks somewhat out of place. LatinVFR does get right the location of the streetlights, being within the wall, as opposed to the exterior location with VMworld AMSim. VMworld AMSim does get right the height of the metal towers next to the ATC tower, while LatinVFR doesn't. The scaling of the windows on the VMworld AMSim ATC tower look way too big and are missing some of the black paneling on the top and bottom of the window. The neighboring catering building, however, does have loading ramps in place with VMworld AMSim, and LatinVFR does not. There are a few buildings in this area as well that are not present in LatinVFR's version that do currently exist. Oddly enough, the LatinVFR ground textures in this area are the ones that start to look more flat and less varied than the VMworld AMSim ones. Meanwhile, in the cargo area, VMworld AMSim left out some buildings and instead placed cargo containers and some GSE. LatinVFR does have some buildings here, but they're relatively generic and could use more detailing to bring them up to modern standards. Down at the FBOs, the hangar models are alright from each developer, with VMworld AMSims being the more accurate ones apart from a color inaccuracy on the roof of the signature building. They also made the decision to use a Sobo aircraft to populate the ramp here, while LatinVFR has custom static models. The parking lot here is also populated with custom static vehicles in LatinVFR's and empty in VMworld AMSim's version. At night, the taxi line center lights are more visible from above with VMworld AMSim, while the taxi signs are more visible from above with LatinVFR. LatinVFR also made the decision to have different temperature lights used for the different terminals, indicating the age of Terminal 1. VMworld AMSim opted to make all the lights one temperature and have a fairly uniform glow around the gate areas. Unfortunately, having the terminal lights be different temperature is the more accurate way of depicting the airport, so the point goes to LatinVFR on that front. At the runway thresholds, I noticed that LatinVFR's wigwags weren't in alignment with the taxiway itself, but VMworld AMSim's were. In snow conditions, LatinVFR's ground receives a pretty uniform coating with the ground paint clearly showing through. VMworld AMSim has a much sparser coating of snow that seems more accurate given the typical climate of San Diego, where it hasn't had measurable snow since 1967. Both sceneries feature terminal interiors, though the actual amount modeled varies quite significantly. LatinVFR's terminal interior only consists of the main room and Terminal 2 and isn't the most detailed. VMworld AMSim is a much more detailed version and has modeling in other concourses and Terminal 1 along with animated passengers. From the reference photos I took on my trip through Terminal 2, VMworld AMSim did a pretty nice job at capturing the interior with the exception of some minor details. Conversely, LatinVFR does model some of the buildings in downtown San Diego, adding a bit more accuracy than the standard photogrammetry buildings present by default. The product page for LatinVFR San Diego also claims to have modeled the USS Midway aircraft carrier that's been converted into a museum. However, this did not appear for me, and neither did the one present in the photogrammetry when using their scenery. A user on their forums brought this and the double windsock issue up to the developer in October 2022, and the developer did respond that they were noted issues, but not top of priorities. VMworld AMSim didn't model the city of San Diego, but did include a lightly modeled version of the North Island Naval Air Station and the Coast Guard station closer to the airport. LatinVFR did include some signs from the Marine Corps Recruit Depot that are visible from the taxiways and runways, as well as the Coast Guard station. Both developers did some modeling of the Solar Turbines facility next to runway 27 as well, to different extents. VMworld AmSim is more detailed, but lacks any branding, and the palm tree placement along the road doesn't have them doubled up like in the real world. In the end, the overall winner here is going to have to go to VMworld AmSim. It offers a more up-to-date version of the airport and better modeling despite a number of smaller inaccuracies. If you prefer an older layout of the airport for older airlines or simply more accurate night lighting, LatinVFR would be the way to go. LatinVFR certainly isn't the most detailed when it comes to finer items like stair modeling, but it got some of the bigger picture pieces right, such as cargo buildings and night lighting. That said, it is showing its age with outdated texture work and modeling. VMworld AmSim picks up in this area, having more attention paid to finer details on textures and models, but missing out on some larger items like a missing jetway and cargo buildings. They also have a modeled interior that is much more detailed than LatinVFR's version if that's something you look for or try to avoid. LatinVFR does add extra detail to downtown San Diego and some of the surrounding area, but misses an advertised aircraft carrier. VMworld AmSim don't model the city, but lightly covers a nearby naval air station. Neither airport particularly wowed me with what it offers, but after flying through, VMworld AmSim seems like the way to go. Both airports perform similarly FPS-wise. Where do you stand? Which airport do you think is the better one, and what factors make you decide that? Do you have one and are now consider switching? Is a switch worth it to you? Let us know down in the comments, and don't forget to check out the accompanying article, link in the description. We'll catch you in the next one.